Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11, Nurtured by Nature. I want to say thank you for coming and joining me on another episode of Healing Connections. And yes, I am doing this via video now because I like for you to know that there is a real person that does talk about this. But today, I am not, what I have to talk about is not my own writing. I want to change things up and throw some medical and scientific documentations at you. So you see that there is a good bit of what we go through is being tracked and how it's being helping those who come after us. Yes, I know for some it may seem late, but if you look at how things have over evolved over years due to scientific studies as well as medical studies, they have improved lives. Hang in there with me and we'll get through this, even if it sounds daunting. You might learn something, there might be something new, and I may or may not do this too often. They say psychological research is advancing our understanding of how time in nature can improve our mental health and sharpen our cognition within the internet becoming increasingly central to American daily lives. 9 in 10 U.S. adults say now they go online every day, and according to a 2024 report from the Pew Research Center, this includes 41% who report using their internet almost constantly. Some groups, including young adults and teens, are more likely to be consistently online than others. About 6 in 10 adults ages 18 through 29, which is 62%, say they are constantly online, compared with smaller shares of those in older age groups, including 15% of those 65 and our increasing reliance on technology combined with the global trend towards urban living means many of us are spending less time outdoors. Even as scientific compile evidence of the value of getting out into the natural, from a stroll through a city park to a day spent hiking in the wilderness, exposure to nature has been linked to a host of benefits. This is including improved attention, lower stress, better mood, reduced risk of psychiatric disorders, and even upticks in empathy cooperation. Well, that was a mouthful. Most research so far has focused on the green spaces such as parks and forests, and researchers are now beginning to study the benefits of blue spaces, places with rivers and ocean views. And yeah, I could kind of see myself whenever I look at these places, whether it be a waterfall or something like that. I can see how that changes how you feel at that moment. It may take you to maybe a childhood memory or just the feeling of what it gives you. But nature comes in all shapes and sizes, and psychological research is still fine turning our understanding of its potential benefits. In the process, scientists are charting a course for policymakers and the public to better tap into the healing powers of Mother Nature. There's mounting evidence from dozens and dozens of researchers that nature has benefits, both physical and psychological human well-beings. This was said by Lisa Nesbitt, who is a PhD and a psychologist at Trent University in Ontario, Canada. She studies connectedness to nature You can boost your mood in just by walking in nature, even in urban nature, and a sense of connection you have with the natural world seems to contribute to the happiness even when you're not physically immersed in nature. Cognitive benefits spending time in nature can act as a balm for our busy brains. Both correctional and experimental research have shown that interacting with nature has cognitive benefits. A topic at University of Chicago psychologist Mark Berman, a PhD, and his student Catherine Schertz, sorry if I mispronounced that, explored in a 2019 review. They reported, for instance, that green spaces near schools promote cognitive development in children, and green views near children's homes promote self-controlled behaviors. Now, as adults assigned to this public housing units in the neighborhood with more green spaces showed better attentional functioning than those assigned to units with less access to natural environments. And experiments have found that being exposed to nature environments improves working memory, cognitive flexibility, and attentional control, while exposure to urban environments is linked to attention deficits. Researchers have proposed a number of ideas to explain such findings. As Nesbitt and colleagues described in a review of the benefits of connecting with nature, the bipolar hypothesis argues that since our ancestors evolved in wild settings and relied on the environment for survival, we have innate drive to connect with nature. The stress reduction hypothesis posits that spending time in nature triggers a psychological response that lowers stress levels. A third idea, attention restoration theory, holds that nature replenishes one's cognitive resources, restoring the ability to concentrate and pay attention. The truth may be a combination of factors. Stress reduction and attention restoration are related, Nibbett points out. And because of the societal problems we're dealing with in terms of stress, both of these theories have gotten a lot of attention from researchers. Experimental findings show how impressive nature's healing powers can be. Just a few moments of green can perk up a tired brain. In one example, Australian researchers asked students to engage in a dull, attention draining task in which they pressed a computer key when certain numbers flashed on a screen. Students who looked out at a flowering green roof for 40 seconds midway through the task made significantly fewer mistakes than students who paused for 40 seconds to gaze at a concrete rooftop. Even the sounds of nature may be receptacle. Berman and colleagues found that study participants who listened to nature sounds like crickets chirping and waves crashing performed better on demanding cognitive tests than those who listen to urban sounds like traffic and the clatter of a busy cafe. Very interesting, because I know at night when I turn on my stars and I have a nature sound that goes with it, it does change or slow down my brain when I'm trying to relax and eventually go to sleep. But just by watching the light action and listening to the stuff really does have an effect on how I go to sleep and how I wake up the next day. Nature and happiness, while such laboratory experiments intriguing, they don't fully capture the diverse benefits that go hand in hand with time spent in the outdoor world, says Cynthia France, a PhD and a professor of psychology and environmental studies at Oberlin College in Ohio. Spending time in nature has cognitive benefits, but it also has emotional and extensional benefits that go beyond just being able to solve arithmetic problems more quickly, she notes. In a review of research, Gregory Bratman, a PhD and assistant professor at the University of Washington, and colleagues shared evidence that contract with nature is association with increased in happiness, subjective well-being, positive effects, positive social interactions, and a sense of meaning and purpose in life, as well as decreased in mental stress. Now, other works suggest that when children get outside, it leaves a lasting impression. In a study of residents of Denmark, researchers used satellite data to assess people's exposure to green space from birth to the age of 10, which they compared with longitude data on individuals' mental health outcomes. The researchers examined data from more than 900,000 residents born between 1985 and 2003. They found that children who lived in neighborhoods with more green spaces had a reduced risk of many psychiatric disorders later in life, including depression, mood disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and substance use disorders. For those with the lowest levels of green space exposures during childhood, the risk of developing mental illness was 55% higher than for those who grew up with abundant green spaces. There is even evidence that images of nature can be beneficial. France and colleagues compared outcomes of people who walked outside in either nature or urban settings with those of people who watched videos of those settings. They found that any exposure to nature, in person or via video, led to improvements in attention, positive emotions, and the ability to reflect on a life problem. But the effects were stronger among those who actually spent time outside. More recently, scientists have begun exploring whether virtual reality nature experiments are beneficial. I don't know. In a review of this work, Matthew White, a PhD, an environmental psychologist at the University of Exeter in England, and colleagues concluded that while real deal is the best, virtual reality can be a worthwhile substitute for people who are unable to get outdoors, such as those with mobility problems or illnesses. Nature might also make us nicer to other people as well as to the planet. John Zelke, PhD a professor at psychology of Carleton University in Ontario, Canada, and colleagues show undergraduates either nature documentaries or videos about archaeological landmarks. Then the participants played a fishing game in which they made decisions about how many fish to harvest across multiple seasons. Those who had watched the nature video were more likely to cooperate with other players and also more likely to make choices that would sustain the fish population. In another experiment, Zelinsky and his colleagues found that elementary school children acted more pro-socially to classmates and strangers after a field trip to a nature school than they did after a visit to an aviation museum. Those generous behaviors weren't attributed to students' moods, Zelinsky and his colleagues found. So it wasn't simply that spending time in nature made them happier and therefore more giving. Another plausible, although it's unproven yet, explanation is the emotion of awe. There are some hints that AWE is associated with generosity, and nature can be a way to induce awe, he says. One of the things that may come from this awe is the feeling that the individual is part of a much bigger whole. Experience versus connection. With so many benefits linked to nature, people naturally wonder, how much time outside is he? That'd be a good question. I know for me, when I sit out back, I try to do these things by just enjoying the yard and the flowers and the fruit trees that we have and see how kind of mood I come back in and what I can accomplish after being out there for an extra 10, 15 minutes. I don't know. White and his colleagues took a stab at answering that question by studying a representative simply of nearly 20,000 adults across United Kingdom. They found that people who spent at least 2 recreational hours in nature during the previous week reported significantly greater health and well-being. That pattern held true across subgroups, including older adults and people with chronic health problems. And the effects were the same, whether they got their dose of nature in a single 120-minute session or spread out over the course of a week. We're not saying we've cracked this nut yet, but this is a first step towards making specific recommendations about how much time in nature is enough. White says the amount of time one spends in nature isn't only element to consider, it's also a beneficial to feel connected to the natural world even when you're stuck at a desk. Researchers call this feeling by a variety of names, including nature relatedness, connectedness to nature, inclusion of nature in self. And they've developed several scales to measure the trait. Whatever you call it, connectedness to nature seems to benefit mood and mental health. In a meta-analysis, Alison Pritchard, PhD, ABPP, at the University of Derby in England, and colleagues found that people who feel more connected to nature have greater, or sorry, I screwed that up. It's a well-being, it's a type of connectment that goes beyond just feeling good and includes having meaningful purpose in life. Whew, wasn't expecting that one. Zelinsky and Nesbitt studied whether connection itself is the magic ingredient. They assessed the overlap between connectedness with nature and a general sense of connectedness, such as feeling in tune with one's friends or community. They found that feeling connected to nature was a significant predecessor of happiness, even after controlling for the effects of general connectedness. People who feel that their self concept is intertwined with nature reported being a bit happier, says Zelensky. Also goes on to say nature connectedness isn't the biggest predecessor of happiness, but the association between the two is quite consistent. In fact, nature might help to buffer the effects of loneliness or social isolation. White and his colleagues surveyed 359 UK residents about their social connection and proximity to nature over the previous week. Social isolation is typically associated with worse subject well-being. But the researchers found that when people with low social connectedness had high levels of nearby nature, they reported high levels of well-being. There are people who don't necessarily want to spend time with others, but they feel connected to the natural environment, and that can enhance their well-being. White says, green and blue spaces, it's clear that getting outside is good for us. Now, scientists are working on determining what types of environments are the best. Much attention has gone to green spaces, but White has studied a variety of marine and freshwater environments and found these blue spaces are also good for well-being. In fact, he says, they may even be slightly more restorative than green spaces. There may also be value in trekking to remote locations. In a survey of 4,515 UK residents, White found that people reported more connection to nature and felt more restored after visiting rural and coastal locations than they did after spending time in an urban green space. Areas deemed to be high environment quality, such as nature reserves and protected habitats, were also more beneficial than areas with low biodiversity. In other works, White and his colleagues found that people who watch nature videos with a diverse mix of flora and fauna reported lower anxiety, more vitality, and better mood than those who watch videos featuring less biodiversity landscapes. But there is an important caveat, White adds. If you have a break from work and you've only got a half an hour, then a wild remote place is no use to you at all. Urban parks and trees also produce positive outcomes. Just like a little exercise is better than none. We should take advantage of green and blue spaces wherever and whenever we can. That's easier said than done, though, especially for people at a social and economic disadvantage. Poor neighborhoods, White notes, are seldom the ones with leafy groves and ocean views. Yet policymakers, city planners, environmental organizations, and government agencies are coming around to the importance of natural spaces. And psychologists are offering them, well, expertise, says White, who has presented his research to groups such as the UK's Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Organizations and cities are expressing interest in this research. Zelensky says, though many policymakers are waiting to see the results of intervention studies before investing in green infrastructure. One of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals includes the target of providing universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public spaces by 2030. There is urgency in fostering these connections, says Nippet, because while people benefit from their connection with the natural world, the environment also benefits when people feel connected and committed to caring for the earth. And between climate change and habitat loss, the planet is in serious need of some. When people are disconnected from nature, they aren't motivated to work on wicked problems like climate change. We are losing the environments that contribute to our flourishing, she says. The key question is, how do we help people feel connected to nature so we're motivated to protect the places that will help us thrive? I want to say thank you for tuning in to this week. I know it was long. I know it may have been boring, but thank you for listening to what is being said out there. I hope that it was not nearly too nerdy and maybe learned a little something out of it. If you want to shoot me an email at htfwmidwest@gmail.com and tell me if you liked it. Tell me if you didn't like it. Tell me if you got something out of it or you didn't. I like to know these things because this will help me grow this podcast into things that are helpful and learningful. So this way we can all connect together. Like I said, knowing these things help me better understand you and maybe what you're more interested in. Take care, and I hope you join me on another episode of Healing Connections. We will not do another scientific one for a while. Keep your head up, stay safe, and remember, I will always have your six. Signing off. Goodbye.